I stopped taking it, and very soon I noticed that it was like having a shroud lifted over you. All of a sudden, it was like waking up from a foggy dream.
Welcome to A Doctor's View with Dr. Polivios, a podcast discussing everyday topics in health, fitness, and mental well-being, as well as providing an insight into medical life and its challenges. Please note that all opinions of the host and guests should not replace advice from your own doctor. Now sit back and enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to Doctor's View. Today we're going to be talking about acne. What I'd like to do is I want to discuss why we get acne, what it is, and I'm going to talk about the various different treatment regimes that are available for acne vulgaris. I'm also going to talk about my own personal experience with acne and some of the more serious treatments, things like Isotretinoin, otherwise better known as Roaccutane, and also my experiences with this drug as well. So firstly, what is acne? Acne is a skin condition, and it usually manifests in spots being the red inflammatory blotches that we see. Now, you can have one or two pimples, and technically that's not classified as acne per se. More than two, and you can define it as acne. And what it is when the hair follicles get plugged up with oil, and it's in this case, it's sebum, which is naturally produced by the sebaceous glands in the skin. And these pores get clogged up, and then this causes a buildup of bacteria, and that's what leads to the red inflammation on the skin. There's different types of acne, and everything in medicine, or most things in medicine, are usually graded between mild, moderate, and severe. So I'm going to talk a bit about that as well later on. We see different types of spots. They range everything from blackheads, which is when the pores get blocked up and they end up with a head on top of them. A white head, whereby the pore doesn't have a head on it, and just you get buildup of sebum in the pore only. And then you start getting into the inflammatory acne and the cystic acne, which we'll talk about later on as well. Now, you can get acne anywhere where there are hair follicles on the body. So the only places that you can't get acne are the palms of your hand, soles of your feet. You will never see acne there. However, you will see acne mainly on the face, and you'll also see it all on the back and chest. These are the most common areas, and the majority of teenagers can relate to this. And the reason is, in teenage life, you have a huge amount of growth hormones, and all of these hormones help increase the production of sebum. And this is why approximately 95% of all people aged between 11 and 30 are affected by acne. It's more common in girls aged between 14 to 17, and in boys slightly later on in life, 16 to 19. But still, this is the majority demographic that is affected. Everyone tends to have acne on and off, and as we get older, symptoms do improve. There's what's called the 25 rule, and for people looking for acne cures, whereby when you reach mid-20s, your acne tends to subside quite substantially. However, in about 3 in every 100, so 3% of adults will have acne later on, and even over the age of 35, they will still develop acne. And this can be quite a traumatic thing to have, depending on how severe it is. Now, I'm going to discuss the different treatments that are available for acne and why you may want to choose one over the other. The treatment that you choose will depend on the type of acne or the severity of acne that you have. As I said before, this ranges from mild to severe. So let's go with mild first. You've got mostly whiteheads and blackheads. You get a few papules, few pustules. So this is the odd red inflamed spot, which has that pus that we see in films and teenagers squeezing into mirrors. Then you go to moderate, and this is more widespread. So it sounds very rudimentary and quite crude in terms of this grading system, but it's a more widespread whitehead, blackhead picture with a lot more papules and pustules. Then we go to severe. And this is when you have lots of the pustules, loads of them. You have nodules, you can get cysts, and you can sometimes see scarring in some people. And a lot of the times, this is quite painful as well. So, depending on the type of acne that you have, this will determine the type of treatment that you might want to choose. Now, one of the most popular and common treatments is a topical cream called benzoyl peroxide. This is available over the counter, definitely in the UK at least, and you can get it in different strengths, 2% or 2.5% and 5%, I believe the strengths are. And what this does is it does dry out the skin. This is very, very good in terms of controlling the oil production or limiting the oil production of the skin. And if you limit the oil production, the sebum production, or you're drying out that extra oil, you're going to have less oil present, so you're going to clog up less pores and less bacteria, and therefore the acne will improve. This does have some downsides, however, and that is it dries the skin incredibly, and it also makes your skin very sensitive to sunlight. So it's always recommended for a lot of these treatments, all the topical treatments, in some cases, some of the treatments you take as tablet forms as well, but I'll come to that later. It's always recommended that we use sunscreen as well. Now, to help with the drying out, it's worth using it with a moisturizer as well, preferably one that isn't oil-based, because you're self-limiting the benefit of the benzoyl peroxide by doing that. I've used benzoyl peroxide, used it for many years, and as a teenager, and I found it was useful. I believe there's studies to show that the concentration, the strength, doesn't actually have much of an impact in terms of the higher strength doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a better outcome. So a lot of people find better outcomes with the lower strengths, the 2.5%, and that's because it doesn't dry out the skin excessively and you suffer less side effects with it, and it's a bit better tolerated. The one thing I will say with benzoyl peroxide is if you do choose to use it, be sure to use old pillowcases and also old towels, because whatever it touches, and I mean whatever it touches, will bleach it. It will destroy all your towels. It will turn them white with patchiness on them. It doesn't matter how careful you are. If you get it on a t-shirt, as you take your t-shirt off for the night, it will bleach that as well. You'll wake up in the morning and your pillowcases will be a different color. So just be sure to use old stuff or stuff that is white or things that you don't mind getting ruined, essentially. And this actually puts a lot of people off. Now, there is a fantastic website that I saw actually at the time when I was suffering quite badly with acne, and it's built on that. And there's an acne.org website, and there's a chap there that talks about the regime. And this is mainly benzoyl peroxide based, and he's got a huge number of testimonials in terms of his regime and how it works. And the basic principles of it is uses very small amounts of benzoyl peroxide and then uses quite a lot of moisturizer afterwards. If you go on that website, there's video instructions and it explains to you very well the whole routine that he does. And the testimonials actually do speak for themselves, and he's also got some products as well there too. Now, that's benzoyl peroxide, very cheap, over the counter, effective for the very mild acne, and in some cases actually even the more moderate acne as well. Other topical treatments, and by topical, things that are applied to the skin, include topical antibiotics. Now, antibiotics we normally associate with a tablet or an injection in hospital, but it can be in a topical form as well, like a cream or a roll-on even. And these can be quite effective too. It has to be prescribed. Your GP or doctor has to prescribe it for you, but it has been shown to have notable benefits, especially for the mild to moderate side of acne. And unfortunately, it doesn't work overnight. None of these treatments work overnight. In fact, we usually say 8 weeks before you start noticing some type of notable improvement. And the reason is 8 weeks is roughly your skin cycle. So whilst you start applying some of these antibiotics or benzoyl peroxide or whatever it is treatment that you're using, it will take the next skin cycle for you to start noticing these benefits. And often this is where downfall happens, whereby people become discouraged by the lack of progress that they're making. They're trying these new regimes, they're trying different medicines, they're trying different creams and gels, and after a week, 2 weeks, they notice things might even get worse, which can happen, and that can be a normal part of the treatment process. And then they become disheartened and stop things altogether, and you go back to square one. Unfortunately, nothing works overnight. So topical antibiotics can be a very effective treatment. Next, we've got oral antibiotics, and as the name implies, it is an oral tablet. Usually starts off with something quite simple. In the UK, we tend to use things like lime cycling, which is a form of tetracycline, and it's relatively well tolerated. Some of these antibiotics, you can't take milk with them, and there's various different things that you may have to adapt, but your doctor will let you know about that if need be. Now, before I talk about Roaccutane or Isotretinoin, I will mention diet. And the reason why I'll mention diet is there's very little evidence about diet and acne, or at least good evidence. Now, I find this is going to be slightly anecdotal. This is based on my own principles or my own experiences. But I noticed every time I was moving places, my acne would clear up. When I was at university, moving from one place to another, things got better every time I'd move somewhere different, and it was quite odd, and I couldn't pinpoint why. And then I realized, I thought it's got to be something that I'm not doing. My fridge is always empty in that first few days when I'm moving into a new flat or a new house to rent, and what I realized was the one thing that took me a few days to buy was milk. And I did a bit of research on this, and it actually makes quite a lot of sense. Now, milk is taken from pregnant cows. All milk is taken from pregnant cows. And by default, that milk, because the has to have growth hormones for the baby calves to grow. And these growth hormones replicate a lot of the hormones that are produced in puberty. So often there is a lot of people that, whilst it might be anecdotal, is a lot of people that suggest that milk is really, really strong exacerbator of acne. And I found I cut milk out for a little while. I replaced it with soya milk or something similar, because obviously you still need to get your calcium levels and all sorts. So I replaced it with soya milk, and I noticed a dramatic improvement in my acne. Now, this was quite a few years ago, and I don't have that same susceptibility anymore to it. And so I can have milk and I don't have the outbreaks of acne. But the changes were dramatic, and I managed to pinpoint that for me. I mention it because whilst I can't provide concrete evidence for it, it might be something worth trying or discussing with your doctor to think about some form of dietary changes, and they can advise you on how to do this safely. So I'm now going to talk about Isotretinoin or Roaccutane. This is a controversial one. It's been in the news quite a lot over the years, and I'll explain what it is. Firstly, Isotretinoin is the actual name of the drug. The brand name is Roaccutane. Some example would be in the UK, you have paracetamol, which is the actual drug, and you have Panadol, which is the trade name or brand name of paracetamol. And Isotretinoin belongs to a group of drugs called retinoids, and these are closely related to vitamin A, and they work in different ways. And the aim of it is to limit the amount of oil or sebum production in the skin, and by doing so, you limit the amount of blockage of the pores, of the hair follicles, and subsequently your acne will reduce. It's usually taken once a day, and it's a course that lasts for a few months, and 9 out of 10 people notice an improvement in their acne. in severe acne. We're talking cystic acne, the type that leaves scarring, and also the ones that are extremely painful. And this is after everything else has failed. Sounds great. However, it's not all great. And I'm going to talk about this now. Firstly, the list of side effects for isotretinoin are huge, absolutely huge. Virtually everyone who takes it will notice dryness and cracking of the lips. And this is, a relatively small thing, but it can last forever. It's not very well documented, but I have heard of cases where the dryness never subsides. It changes your blood sugar levels. It can cause inflammation. You might notice blood in your urine. It has huge effects on the liver, and you need to constantly have liver function tests done whilst you're on it. You need to have blood tests done whilst you're on it. And I noticed, at least when I was on it, my liver functions became deranged as well. So it does actually have a big effect on it. Isotretinoin is also a teratogenic. A teratogenic is a drug that causes damage to an unborn baby. So if you're a female childbearing age, you're advised not to use tretinoin if you're pregnant or you think you're pregnant. It's contraindicated. You should not be doing it. You will be asked to provide a pregnancy test before being started on isotretinoin. You have to have a pregnancy test before, during, and after the treatment as well. And the birth defects are severe for taking it. And it's definitely something that needs to be considered if you're planning on starting a family. And also, it's not suitable if you're breastfeeding either. It does pass through into the milk ducts. The next very serious side effect is one of the reasons why this drug has become so controversial and why people have asked for it to be banned and outlawed. And the reason is because of mood changes. There's been a number of suicides in the UK, at least, and I believe in the States, been quite a high number too, of people who have been taking isotretinoin, and it is associated with mood changes. Now, the controversy lies because it's still unclear as to what it is that's causing it, the mood changes. Is it the fact that you have the acne that is depressing you, and that's led to the mood changes and the subsequent suicide? Is it other factors, or is it the fact that you are on the isotretinoin? This is unclear. My own personal experience would suggest that yes, it does deeply affect mood in some people, for sure. I noticed it hugely. I could not finish my course when I was at university. This was, albeit quite a few years ago now. I took it for about 4 weeks, and I remember going into an exam at the time. It was an OSCE, which is our practical exams. I couldn't function very well. I noticed that I was burning up entirely. The amount of energy that I was just producing just to stay alive whilst taking this drug was astronomical. I was always red, I was always hot, and I remember just always running to the fan whilst taking this practical exam. In between each station, I would just run towards a fan to try and stay cool. I noticed that my mental function had decreased. I couldn't calculate basic things that you can do very, very quickly and very easily. I remember one station was working out a BMI, body mass index, very simple equation, very simple formula. It took me most of the station to work out this patient's BMI. I couldn't function at my normal level. I also noticed that in the few weeks that I took it, I became very, very depressed. And this was in spite of seeing an improvement in my skin. So I don't believe it was because of the acne that was causing my depression. I did attribute it very strongly with the Roaccutane, with the isotretinoin. I just noticed I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to sleep. I wanted to just curl into a little ball and to be left alone and to sleep. And when I the turning point was when I went home to visit family, and they looked at me and they could see something wasn't right. I had lost a huge amount of weight. I just looked tired. I looked drained, and I just wasn't my normal self. And I was advised by a family member to, stop taking it. And at the time, I couldn't attribute it to the Roaccutane. I couldn't. It was like a shroud, as it were. And I thought, well, maybe they're right. Maybe it is because of this. I stopped taking it, and very soon I noticed that it was like having a shroud lifted over you. All of a sudden, it was like waking up from a foggy dream. Over the next few days, and I got all my clarity back, and I realized just how dangerous this medicine was for me. Equally, I know of people who have taken it and have had no problems with it, other than, say, minor side effects. So I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak anecdotally from my point of view. If it was up to me, would I ban it? I'd have a very, very good look at it. And would I ever prescribe it for a patient? Probably not. I would not. I think it should, firstly, if it is going down that route, it should be reserved. And thankfully in the UK, at least, it usually is reserved for patients who have very, very severe cystic acne. The type, like I say, scars and causes problems later on, or is very, very painful. But I just can't recommend it, unfortunately, and especially with all the side effects. I mean, I've listed only a few of them. This is forgetting things like the pancreatitis, hair loss. Mentioned the liver. Like I say, some of these side effects don't get better. So there are studies, and there are case reports out there of people suffering with these symptoms long term, and a lot of regret in ever taking it. I know from myself, the lip dryness, for example, that took years for it to subside for me. I would say over 6 years for it to go, and it was not very pleasant. Whilst it got better as soon as I stopped taking it, I did notice that over winters and even in the summer, I would just have constantly dry lips, and they'd be very painful. They would crack, they would bleed, and it wasn't every day, but it was definitely something. And I'd notice it, and I would think to myself, I really regret taking that drug. I only took it for a few weeks because I was suffering too badly from the side effects. And isotretinoin was actually developed as a form of chemotherapy for some types of skin cancer. And I think if we're going down the route of chemotherapy for an acne treatment, essentially, there's got to be a very good reason for it. And in the UK, it must be a specialist doctor, a dermatologist who prescribes it. I think in some cases, a very specialist GP who focuses on skin conditions can have a license to prescribe it, but mainly it's with a dermatologist who sees you in clinic, advises you, tries everything else before it goes on it. My point about this drug is it's not without its faults, and it's not without its risks. So it's not the simple one-stop shop that might be promised to you in forums. So please be very careful. Remember that it is a teratogenic. It will cause birth defects if you're pregnant around the time of taking it, or during taking it, or you're breastfeeding. It will cause potentially liver problems. It can cause kidney problems. It can cause all sorts of things. And ultimately, it can also cause quite severe mood changes and depressive symptoms. And it has been linked to suicide in the past. There is a topical form of it, retinoid. It's like a roll-on that you put on the skin. So it's the side effects aren't as severe, but again, it can still cause the birth defects and things like that, because it does get absorbed by the skin. Whilst I believe it is more better tolerated. I don't know too much about it, but it is something that can be discussed with a dermatologist. Now, there are complications that may arise from having acne just by itself, and these are usually cosmetic complications. Acne can lead to scarring, and it can lead to low mood. And I do think it is important to treat it, at least, maybe not with Roaccutane, of course, but I do believe it's important to go to your doctor and have a good discussion about what the steps would be. The start off with the gentle things and discuss a plan with them, and overall, this can help prevent scarring from happening and help later on in life, because whilst in most cases acne does subside later on in life, late in the mid-20s, early 30s, what you don't want is to have been picking at your spots and been trying all these harmful regimes causing scarring and hyperpigmentation and things like that, and then have acne clear up later on and be left with all the scars, which can be very difficult to treat. Prevention is better than treatment and cure. So you want to try and prevent them from happening in the first place. So do speak to your doctor. They can advise you, and they can also refer you on to a dermatologist, someone who has specialized in skin conditions and can provide you with really good treatment regimes and can advise what the best way forward would be. Before I end, I'm going to try and dispel some myths about acne. Firstly, you can't catch it from anyone. It's not contagious. It's not a skin condition that is because of poor cleansing. It's mainly hormone related, and it's not because you're not washing enough. In some cases, it's because you're washing too much. One of the big temptations, especially when you're younger and your hormones are all over the place, you want to go to parties, you want to impress your friends, all these things. There's a tendency to want to clean your skin as often as possible, and you go to the supermarket, you buy sometimes quite caustic face creams, and you use them 2, 3, 4 times a day. It makes it worse. In some cases, just simple water is more than enough. A simple oil-free soap twice a day. Wash very, very gently. Over rubbing the skin can make things worse, can cause further inflammation. You then just pat dry with a towel. That's all you need to do. Don't rub your face with a towel, just pat dry it. Other things that can be done in terms of just normal everyday things. I mentioned diet earlier on. That's going to be a bit hit and miss depending on who you are. I found it worked for me. Changing pillowcases often is a very, very, very good thing. I noticed when I was doing on-calls, or even now when I do on-calls and I stay in the on-call room, because it's a different pillowcase, I do often end up with a mild outbreak of acne, which subsides, after my on-calls finish, and I'm sure it's due to being up during the nights and changing hormone balance and all sorts. But I have noticed that since starting to use my own pillowcases, I've noticed a big improvement in that, and changing them frequently. Don't just leave them for a week, 2 weeks. Change them every other day. Use fresh towels as often as possible. I appreciate if you're doing the benzoyl peroxide treatment, this might be a bit tricky, but try and alternate bedding, try and alternate pillowcases, try and alternate your toweling as well. All these things do help. You're limiting the amount of bacteria that will go back onto the skin. Also, please don't pick them. I know it's easier said than done, and I can tell you this from personal experience, but you do end up with scarring, and you will regret it later on once your acne does clear up. I will say one final thing for everyone who is affected by acne, and for those who are being troubled by it and are at loose ends and their wit end to try and come up with a solution, and they've tried everything and it's really getting them down. The one thing I will say is no one cares that you have spots. I don't mean that as in no one cares that you're suffering. I mean that as no one associates you with your spots. They associate you for your personality. They associate you for the way you treat people. They associate you for the way you present yourself in every other way. I guarantee you, the person that notices the spots the most is you. And no one else. No one will even notice that you're having an outbreak, as it were, or having a bad skin day. It's not the first thing people notice about you. They associate you with you, not because it's not going to stop you from making friends or anything like that. It's easy to say, and we're all guilty of being self-conscious, of course. I do understand. But please remember, it doesn't define you. And with that, I will leave you. And as always, please take care of yourselves, and I'll join you again next time. I'm Dr. Bolivios. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to A Doctor's View. If you're enjoying the show, please don't forget to subscribe or follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss a future episode. If there are any topics you would like considered for the show, please get in touch via email at adoctorsview@gmail.com or visit adoctorsview.uk. And be sure to follow the show on Instagram at adoctorsview for some behind-the-scenes posts. See you at the next episode.